The purpose of this video is to generally go over some of the different psychological tests that you can do. And some of them are not traditionally thought of as psych tests, but given this new holistic approach that you guys are learning about, they actually do fit well within the psychological purview. And I'll explain a little bit more what that means. But what I plan on doing is showing you guys the list of lab tests that were posted. It's in a couple places in Blackboard. And then I'm going to make a series of videos, so each video will go over very briefly one test that you might consider. So this video is going to be a general overview, and then we're going to go over hair testing for heavy metals. Okay. So one of the places that you can find the lab test options is in week 2 content. So you'll go start here, week 2, lab test options. Okay, and download. So it was funny at the time. I'm a little tired today, but so this was called If I Had $1 Million Lab Tests. Some of these tests are very cost prohibitive. Unfortunately, a couple of them are reasonable, and so that's something that you're going to have to investigate. But in the document itself, I included versions of the tests that were both that both had high integrity and were the cheapest. So integrity just meaning that the labs have a decent reputation. And that you can actually say something about the data, because not all tests are created equally. Okay, so then you'll save this, and I have one open already, so I'm going to pull it up here. Okay, so in this document, these are some of the things that you can add on to the Ulta lab that I sent directions for last week, or 2 weeks ago now. So these are some things that you can add on. And I'll do a separate video on these things. But so if we scroll down, I talk about hair tests for heavy metals. Okay, why would we want to do a hair test for heavy metals? So people are actually exposed to a wide range of heavy metals, and heavy metals aren't, bad in and of themselves, but sometimes what can happen is that they get into our body and they can cross the blood-brain barrier and interfere with our normal functioning, our normal brain function. So as an example, Kelly, he had very high levels of copper. And so high levels of copper have been associated with psychotic symptoms and schizophrenia. And there are new reports out showing that females who are on birth control experience a disproportionate amount of mood swings. And in part, that can be because there's an accumulation of copper owing to how the contraceptive interacts with zinc and B12. Okay, so this is not something that happens in every single woman that takes birth control, but if you are suffering from mood swings, irritability, if you're experiencing psychotic symptoms, testing your copper would make a lot of sense. And again, this is not me saying come off of your birth control, because if you are not prepared to have a child, that can definitely be more damaging to you than having copper in your system. So, play it smart, okay? But this is something to consider. So, hair test for heavy metals. This test was the cheapest that I could find that provided reasonable information. Okay, so it does test for certain other nutrients. It tests for a couple of vitamins as well. But these are some of the things that if you're concerned about, you might consider this test. And here is an example report. So this report tested 15 nutritional elements, okay, and this person's copper was acceptable, but potassium and zinc were low. So if you have low zinc levels, that can interfere with your body's ability to utilize B12, vitamin B12. So if your vitamin B12 is low, you are going to be chronically tired. Okay. This person had high cobalt, which is really interesting because part of why I was a minute late to class the other day is I have a patient who actually has cobalt toxicity. And a slew of doctors have missed this. He has a pretty significant neurological impairment, but it's actually from cobalt buildup from a prosthetic. He had a hip surgery, and the titanium replacement has alloys that include cobalt and nickel. And so what's going on is that the cobalt was leaching out from his prosthetic and causing his neurological symptoms. So if they had done a hair test, years ago, this man would not be in this position. And unfortunately, it's not something that neurologists are often trained in. So, it's just good to know. I'm trying to expose you guys to these different possibilities. But, I have an example of this right now. Kelly, he had high copper, so his was over here. If they had tested Kelly 10 years ago and they were able to do chelation therapy, meaning, extract copper from his system, he might be leading a different life. So, these heavy metal tests get kind of swept under the rug in favor of drugs that, treat symptoms instead of getting to the root cause. But I would highly recommend the hair mineral test if you can afford it. Okay. Oh, and really quick, so the heavy metals, where do they come from? So heavy metals can be in your water, and not just your tap water, but also your bath water. So if you don't have a filter, on your entire home unit, then you're definitely going to be exposed to high levels of chlorine. Meridian does have high levels of iron, and I believe high levels of copper in the water, but that was a couple of years ago the last time I checked. But point being, this stuff can absorb through your skin, okay? And that's how these things can accumulate. They also come in from drinking water. And if I can remember, or if you guys want to remind me, we can talk about ways to eliminate those problems at their source. But, it involves investing in a water filter. It could involve, putting bentonite clay into your bath water. So bentonite clay actually binds to different metals in your water. And the resulting bond that forms is so large, the overall complex is so large, that it can no longer go into your skin. So that's another, thing you can consider. And it also gives you, some recommendations. So I'm sorry, I'm all over. Okay, so zinc was low. So it does mention, taking zinc, but zinc works really well with vitamin D12. So it gives you some recommendations. This, again, is the cheapest test. If I had a lot of money or a decent amount, I believe this trace elements test is, I know of a practitioner who can do it for you guys for, I believe, $150. But shoot me an email if you want more information on this particular test. But this is a hair sample. Okay, so look at copper. This is a Boise native female who was on oral contraceptives for years and years. So she's 47, right? She's off the charts. Okay, and I happen to know this person. I would definitely say that she has some emotion regulation problems. Her calcium's really high. Check this out. Uranium. Okay, that's not good. All right. That can also come from a water source. So there was a mining town. Was it Silver Falls? And what the natural doctors say in this area is that over time, runoff from that mine came down into the Meridian area. And so that's why we have a lot of heavy metals in our water. Okay, so this person I do know did chelation therapy after seeing this. Okay. So lithium's also in our water for various reasons. Lithium is not just something that comes in a bottle that's manufactured by Big Pharma. It is a salt, and it's a natural occurring salt. So, fun fact. And it does give you some ratios here. I would not want to interpret your result for you if you were to do this test, but if you pay for this test and go through the practitioner I know, she would interpret it for you. Okay. All right. Anything else on heavy metals? Oh, I'll just say this. So some people, they determine whether they have a metal issue based on blood or urine testing. So blood serum does tell you about, metals acutely, whereas hair and mineral analysis, a hair test tells you about accumulation of metals over the past 3 months or longer. Okay, so it gives you more information than a blood test would, but that is definitely not to say that, don't even bother with a blood test if you can't afford it. Do the blood serum test if that's what you can afford. It will give you information, okay? And let's see, what else? Also, so when you do chelation therapy, there are a couple ways to do it, but usually you're under the supervision of a doctor, and oftentimes they use something that's called EDTA. So that's EDTA. And what that does is it goes into your body, binds with the metals, and then it excretes them in the urine. So unfortunately with EDTA, it's not selective for metals, so it does bind to other things like calcium, which is unfortunate, but as long as you're supplementing with calcium, you're not going to have, calcium extracted from your bone. Okay, if you have osteoporosis, that's a situation where you definitely want to be doing this with a doctor's supervision. Okay, and then for urine tests, a lot of times people see if the chelation is successful by looking at the metabolites, or not the metabolites, the excreted metal in the urine. Okay, so the theory there is, well, if chelation is working, then we should see an increase in heavy metal content in the urine. Okay, so that is a way to kind of test to make sure that things are working the way they should in terms of the chelation protocol. Another thing, if you can't afford chelation and you see that you do have heavy metal issues, you can take cilantro. That helps bind with metals. Or chlorella is another one that's commonly used. Bentonite clay is another one. And these are things that that doctors recommend for people who are who have hip replacements and any kind of metal in their body. And this is because that metal can leach out into the system, and these herbs, these supplements actually help excrete that metal from the body so that it doesn't accumulate in the system. Okay? All right. Let's call it a wrap for the heavy metal.